Hello everybody, it's Peter Mizen here from Grace Community Church in Edenbridge, and I'd like to say Happy New Year to you and welcome to the Epiphany service. It's not a word that you hear very often in churches like ours, but traditionally it's when the Christian church celebrate the coming of the Magi, or the three wise men, or the three kings. Now, I don't know if you've seen the film Nativity or Nativity 2. They're very silly films, but great fun and had a little bit of a nod towards Christianity in them. But like all nativities, unfortunately, they bear some resemblance to the Bible story, but there are some artistic licenses going on. You might remember, if you're in our church then, that Dave spoke to us a few years ago about the fact that Jesus was probably not born in a stable, but was probably born in a house. And that's because the houses at that time would often have a lower room which contained the animals. So that's one sort of myth that's blown in our nativity story. Also, the inn, when they're saying there's no room at the inn, that word apparently can be translated as spare room. So it's likely that there was no room in the spare rooms in the area, possibly because there's lots of people coming back for the census, or possibly because Joseph was rejected by his relatives who lived there because of the state of Mary. The Bible account also fails to mention the three kings. In fact, it describes them as the Magi, who were probably astrologers or astronomers. At that time, the science of astronomy and the mythology of astrology were kind of mixed up. And there could have been any number of them. We assume there was three because of the three gifts. So let's just have a read of Matthew 2 and see what it says there about the story. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So it would seem from that the Magi came after Jesus was born. Verse 11 says that they visited the child, or the infant, not the baby. And also they had to go to Herod first, so it's likely that this was after the birth. So no stable, no innkeeper, no kings, and probably not even Magi when Jesus was born. So I've completely blown apart the nativity story. Sorry about that. Let's have a look at this star then. I used to teach physics to senior school children, and I also did an astronomy club where I taught GCSE astronomy, and the children who wanted to come did an exam in that as well. So stars and planets have always intrigued me. But it looks like, despite all the research that has gone on over the years, nobody can really pin down what this star really was. Some people say it's a supernova, that's a star that's exploded, and there are reports from Chinese and Korean astronomers suggesting that there was a supernova, or there may have been a supernova at that time. Same with a comet. It may have been a comet at that time. In fact, comets come around fairly regularly. Others think that it might have been a conjunction of planets in the sky. So a conjunction is when two or more planets come close together. And in fact, there was a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter this year, and the papers were calling it the Christmas star. And we actually managed to see it on the 20th of December. They were closest on the 21st, but we saw it on the 20th, and it was quite an impressive sight. And planets tend to come out first after sunset because they're the brightest, and it was quite convincing sight, really. But as the Earth spins, all the stars and the planets seem to go around. They seem to be moving. So if the Magi did see a conjunction of planets, it certainly wouldn't have rested above a particular point. So having destroyed everything, what do we know? Well, we know that the Magi came a long way, and they brought expensive gifts with them. These gifts have symbolism, and they point to Jesus as being king and priest, and they also point to his death. In fact, two of the gifts are mentioned in Isaiah 60. In Isaiah 60, verse 3, it says, "Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn." And in verse 6, it says, "And from Sheba all will come, bearing gold and incense, and proclaiming the praise of the Lord." And if you know your Bible, you remember that Sheba was where the Queen of Sheba came from, brought gold to King Solomon. It was probably near Saudi Arabia or Yemen, present day. So gold is a symbol for kingship. We all know it's a precious metal, and it was actually used to cover the inner sanctum of the temple of God. So that signifies the holiness of Jesus as well as his kingship. Frankincense is actually dried sap that comes from the bark of a particular tree when it's scraped, and it's obviously got a good, nice smell. And it was used in the recipe for incense that was mentioned in Exodus 30, so this was a long time ago, and as such it's a symbol of priesthood. So we've got Jesus, king and priest, we've got gold and frankincense showing that. And myrrh, which also comes from the sap of a tree, is used as an embalming oil. In other words, when somebody dies and they embalm them to preserve the body, the myrrh is used. So it's a symbol of death, and obviously for Jesus it's a symbol of Jesus' death. So what else can we say about the wise men? I think it's interesting to look at the reactions of Herod and the priests. Like many people, Herod was very hostile. Obviously there was a direct threat to his authority, and you may remember he went on and sanctioned the death of any boy under the age of 2 to make sure that there wasn't a king to surpass him. He didn't want to bow down to someone who was much greater than he was. And that sort of attitude is around today. I've come across several people have been quite hostile towards Christianity, including my own brother. Secondly, the priests, hearing that the Magi were going off to look for the newborn king, well, they didn't bother to go with them, did they? They didn't seem to be bothered. Either perhaps they didn't believe them, or perhaps they just couldn't be bothered. And I think that is an attitude, again, that we see today quite a lot. People know about Jesus, they know about Christianity, they know about God, but they just couldn't be bothered to do anything about it. So we really need to pray for the hostile ones and the apathetic ones, and of course the ones that God has his hand on and will bring into the fold. Now finally, I'm unashamedly turning now to John Piper, who's a great theologian, and he's going to help me wrap this up. He's got quite a lot to say on this topic about the Magi. So I've only taken a little tiny bit of what he's said about it in his talk. This bit really struck me, and I have changed the wording a bit, just to make it a bit more straightforward. What he says is that worshipping Jesus means joyfully giving authority and dignity to Christ with sacrificial gifts. And he unpacks that. He says there are 4 parts to that definition of worship. That's his definition. And all 4 are in this text. So first of all, we see the Magi giving authority to Christ by calling him King of the Jews. Secondly, we see that the Magi gave dignity to Christ by falling down in worship. If you fall to the ground in front of somebody, you're basically saying that person is higher than you and you are lower than them. Thirdly, we see the joy that the Magi felt. In verse 10, in one translation it says, this is a familiar one, when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. So not just rejoicing, but rejoicing exceedingly with great joy. So you can't get more joyful than that. And what was their joyfulness all about? Well, they were on their way to see the Messiah. So true worship is not just giving authority and dignity to Christ. It is doing this joyfully. It's doing it because we've come to see something about Christ that is so desirable that being near him and giving him authority and dignity is overwhelmingly compelling, is what we really want to do as Christians. And the 4th part of the definition of worship here is that we're giving sacrificial gifts. Now those gifts could be any number of things. Obviously for the wise men it was expensive giving those gifts to Jesus. But for us it could be giving financially to things, or it could be our time, or just a kind word, or taking an interest in somebody, or serving in some other way. So worshipping Jesus means joyfully giving authority and dignity to Christ with sacrificial gifts. So as we start the new year, let's remember the joy that being a Christian is, and be prepared to give sacrificial gifts. Happy New Year to you.